Hi, everyone. We'd like to welcome you all on the Tech Factor podcast by Purple Quarter. It's so lovely to have you, Rajesh, on our podcast. Thank you so much for doing this so early your time, 8 a.m. Is it what it is in Seattle?
Yeah, it's exactly just a little over 8. Bright and early for me. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to talk.
Awesome. So for all the audience who'd like to know a little bit about Rajesh, Rajesh Mishra is currently in Seattle. Rajesh, it intrigues me to look at your profile because of two important factors. I think we discussed this while we met over coffee as well. But if I were to look at your journey, it's an awesome one for most founders to actually attract talent because this is just your third company. You spent over a decade with two different firms, Microsoft, then Google, and now with Okta. So my famous question that I generally ask people is, how do you manage to be in these companies for more than a decade, right? What was it that kept you at these companies? If you could help us from technology aspect as well as, in terms of even your switches, if it kept you for a decade, what made you switch? That'll be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, even though it seems eternity in a couple of these places, I think we'll all agree that these are iconic companies of our time. My focus has always been trying to do interesting work, and I would say largely working on platform, or I'd say application services that solve problems for a very large user base. So that's always been my motivation. If I just track what I have done over the years, that's been my biggest draw factor.
Sure.
The thing with both Microsoft and Google, where I spend a lot of time, they've both been platform companies and tech platform companies, and also they built iconic application services like Gmail or the Office suite. I think both of them have been, I've worked in both places in tech platforms. Of course, tech platforms, they've changed, they've evolved over time. There was a time when I did everything as shrink wrapped. Just the issue around and you deliver a software or a CD and try to deal with all the consequences. I think we put enormous amount of focus trying to make it deliver and test it really well. I think that changed with cloud. So I've kind of lived both lives here. And platforms command, if they're done right, they command enormous power, and I have seen its direct, indirect benefits to the large user base. So that's been, I would say, the big draw factor for me. And I would say that's why I never got bored, and I kept changing along the way. I never stayed in one place. I've done a whole range of things like databases, applications like working on G Suite's underlying platform that helps us sell those things to enterprise customers, building commerce technologies related to that. I feel like I've done a lot of things along the way. I've done analytics, advertiser technologies, web conferencing. I spend a good amount of time at Google trying to build compute platform that was a very small, just getting started kind of thing, and I just took that one to a pretty large adoption state. So that's what the journey's been like. It's been a lot of problem solving, a lot of learning along the way, especially as those domains were different. But at the core, they're all building platforms, and platforms have big power. So
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I'm just going to take a cue from what you just said. You've done so many different things, right, within technology itself. So what is it that you consider? I know that you mentioned platform engineering seems to be a sweet spot, right, Rajesh? So if you were to
Yep.
actually talk about, if you were to give advice to a B2C firm from a platform engineering concept, would you want to share, one specific or two specific things that come to your mind?
Yeah, sure. I would say from an advice standpoint, B2C is consumer consumption, right?
Yeah.
So more like either social media software or I think more appropriate one would be Gmail, productivity suite, kind of thing. I'd say when I talked about the two lives I lived, and there's a lot of focus in the initial parts of the shrink wrap software, which was focused on micro optimizations because computers were not as connected at the time, and that used to be an operations engineering problem. So as developers, we focus mostly on those, trying to make sure that our software worked the best on one machine. A lot of the network problems were kind of like left on the table. I think as B2C has evolved, the servers are in the cloud and they're always on, they're always live, and somebody's trying to access those services at any given point of time. So I'd say the biggest thing here is about service uptime, service health, ensuring that whatever all software is never perfect, and there is this spectrum that people deal with, are the two sides of the pendulum that most engineering teams deal with. That let's ship at a very bleeding edge speed, going from what I experienced at during my Windows time at Microsoft, every 2-year release of Windows to 6 months to now people are doing weekly releases to even maybe daily releases. So when you're doing that level of change, those changes will inherently have bugs. So how do you make sure those bugs are well contained? So that's all about devising all DevOps model that ensures that your software's those bugs are not going to be seen by your customers, or you've better caught them in your release process. So I think that focus on trying to extremely automate the release pipeline, and also extreme monitoring and alerting, and this whole idea of designing a very well-tested rollback system. I think those all are the key, I would say, ingredients to make a B2C very successful. I'd say make it very. These are the metrics that you focus a lot on. How many times I've seen issues in my preview environment or my staging environment. I think that's the best place to catch those things in canary and staging, and quickly roll back, as opposed to trying to live fix the problem. Because that's always live debugging is very hard. You will often not get it right. So all of this is building engineering systems for CI/CD and release pipeline are going to be very critical for any successful B2C service. The other side of the coin, other than the consumption side of the user consumption side of the thing, is developer happiness. So if you get some of these things right, I think developers are going to be the most happiest when they see that their software they built, it's just taking maybe if not weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, if not days, a few weeks, and it actually makes it to customers. I think that's very gratifying to a lot of engineers. Also, that speed of trying to have an idea and take it to a release state is super powerful idea to keep your developers very happy. And some of the friction point that I talked about, I think you just design your system such that developers can be sloppy, but the system takes care of it, which is I've got an amazing test bed that validates and that will push back my change and help me along the way. And I think that will keep the whole pipeline super healthy and your customers happy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That was, extremely relevant for B2Cs, because I think what they struggle with, like you rightly pointed out, is in terms of live data feed that happens. And there's so much of, I don't know if I should call it traffic, but it's the number of times a person's querying into the database, right? So it does become the most important aspect. Thanks for that input, Rajesh. I also was wondering, Google had a lot of opportunities for you to offer. You were there for 12 years, and then you move into an identity management company, Okta. How did that happen? What did you see? Is it the technology that you were keen on?
Yeah, I think my primary motivations to leave Google were twofold. I think I was looking for the first is I was looking for a big impact, and I think every company, once it becomes big, they will acquire a level of overhead, and I think the amount of overhead just was a little. I think it had reached a place where I felt that can I be in an environment where there's less of that and more of actual doing and building things.
Sure.
So that was one big motivation. The other motivation was Okta's in a very interesting space. Is something that I haven't. It was very fascinating to see all the changes we've experienced in just the 2 years. That felt like 10 years of change just compressed in a few years of pandemic, when there was a rapid, I would say, digitization and adoption across the board, even from, I'd say, sectors that are not very generally tech oriented. They went full on with a lot of technology adoption, whether it's smart cards or trying to manage their workforce and employees.
Sure.
I think we saw a lot more digital adoption, and I think all of that meant that Okta was poised for that big transformation. So for somebody with 2+ decades of experience, I felt there's a lot I can offer in terms of both technology scale, maturity, and trying to also help influence organizational and people processes, and generally just the way we go build software and release software. I think some of those were big draw factor for me from an Okta standpoint. Sure. And also, I would say my previous 2 stints, both at Microsoft and Google, when I joined, they were much smaller, and they were founder-led. When I joined Microsoft, it was founder-led by Bill. It was very magical to be founder-led, very inspirational for an younger engineer. I felt the same with Larry and Sergey when I joined. In fact, when I joined, it was Eric Schmidt who was the adult supervision CEO. Okay. But very soon, Larry came on, and it was great to interact, get to experience his or their leadership. They would be there in every TGIF. So I think some of that founder-led dynamics had actually left a very strong impression on me. And in that sense, Okta is still founder-led. I met the founder when I met Todd, who's our CEO, for our interview, and I was very impressed with his interest in trying to build a very strong culture. So I think you could say that's another big pull factor where I settled on Okta. So far, it's been exciting. As the big set of macro conditions have changed very rapidly. So I think all of that is I'd say a challenge, and we're trying to work through that. And frankly, I'm having a great time.
Awesome. Could we talk a little bit about the tech stack? Because I love the way that you said, hey, a lot of offline companies coming online. So Okta is actually focusing on them. I'm sure you're working on building a seamless platform for people who don't really use so much of technology. So can we talk about a bit of what you are contributing to this whole thing?
Yeah, sure. So at a very high level, Okta's it's an identity security company.
Right.
So this idea of when people want to go do any kind of online transaction or digital interaction, everybody's got some sorts of digital computer that they're dealing with, whether it's their traditional desktop, laptop, or they're trying to use their mobile applications. That's the start of a digital persona, and that persona could run into trouble if there's a lot of fraudulent stuff that can happen with your digital systems, digital persona, and privacy leaks and cyber attacks. I think a lot of that needs a very focused approach trying to manage that. So it's about digital identity and all the resources that they're trying to access, digital resources, whether it's their files in Dropbox or Google Drive, or access some applications like Slack or Salesforce. All of this does require that the origin is can I trust who you claim that you are, that person? And from that point on, based on that trust, based on the kind of access permissions that we can allow you to have, those transactions can happen. So that's the high level of what Okta is about. Those are the primary use cases that it's trying to solve for. And the way we are approaching this is just picking up on the terminology that you built, B2C. So we cater two audiences, the B2B and B2C. The B2B, actually, maybe B2B is an incorrect word. It's a workforce identity is what we call.
Sure.
And the other is the B2C, which is more, we call it customer identity. So the canonical use case of the first one is employees in a large organization that will, during their lifetime of being an employee, they will have access to resources within that company, whether it's Okta, whether it's Google, whatnot. Or customer identity is the indirect use case where, let's say you use Uber or your banking services, you're a direct customer. You need a similar type of thing, but you're trying to access just a small set of things, just limited to this. This is not like a lot of applications, just that one service that you're trying to access. Sure. So both those use cases, what Okta serves, and the latter part that I mentioned actually happened through an acquisition. It's a Seattle-based acquisition that Okta did not too long ago, called Auth0. So those are the two big parts of, I'd say, what makes up Okta. And in terms of technical stack, I'd say Okta is not super old company. It's about 12, 13 years old. So I'd say it's a modern SaaS platform company. That's the best way to describe this. In order to build both those parts that I talked about, the workforce identity and the customer identity, it uses a lot of other platform building blocks. So, for example, we host on AWS. We are a big user of their cloud infra, whether it's compute, storage, or their network services or database services. Our basic building block, like we design, I think a lot of our software, our business logic is written in Java. But in addition to Java, there's a lot of Objective-C, or I'd say Kotlin. These are the things that is needed for writing that device level software, because that's where a lot of the initial identity journey starts. So I'd say at a very high level, that's where we are from a programming language standpoint. We are using a lot of application framework like React for UI, Spring Framework, Node.js. There's maybe, I don't recall this very well, but we have either built our own job framework or this orchestration framework for long-running asynchronous multi-step transactions. But that's something we definitely have. We use Splunk. That's another platform SaaS service. We use a lot of, I'd say, everyday business tools along the way. So we're huge consumers of Atlassian software like Jira for our issue management. We use their Wiki system. We use developer tools like IntelliJ. We want just how do we make ourselves productive? We use Google's G Suite for our general communications or email, or we use Zoom. We use Slack. So we're not pinned on one thing. We're trying to take the best of breed software. So that's our general technical stack. What I guess maybe your key question there is what drives our system. So I'd say it's at a high level where we need a notion of directory, because we need a digital user representation. So we model that as in our directory software. So very similar to how Microsoft has done with its Active Directory software. So we have our directory software, and this is where the users are represented. Of course, there's a lot of cryptography kind of protocol-oriented software that we have written, because identity is extremely standards driven. So there are a lot of standards of SAML, OIDC, OAuth protocols. We have built, we've designed our system to work against all those protocols for all the applications that we provide. Because we're a platform service, we need to make sure that we defend ourselves from bad actors. So we've put in a lot of effort to design disaster recovery, to make our software extremely resilient and redundant, with adding a lot of redundancy. I'd say all of that, the whole pursuit is to design a very highly available, high uptime service. And I think, because think of this, if the authorization service is down, you cannot access any resources. So that's something that we try to never have. And the only way we're going to do this by ensuring there's a lot of focus on building a very resilient system. There's a lot of risk analysis, those kind of patterns that we're built in. Just last week, we had a big, very coordinated attack from a bad actor. They were trying to make money on us by, so we use telephony services like Twilio underneath the covers.
Sure.
So this is where you get your those extra PIN codes as multi-factor authentication, extra steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of that goes on and underlying the telephony service that I said. And there is a way by bad actors to set up in a way that they use some premium lines where they actually benefit from that. We actually noticed this. Our ML system detected this, and we were able to stop that. So we actually denied those requests. And
how quickly did this happen? And did it flag off like instant? And
so it's all automated. The system detected it, flagged, and I think within I don't remember the full details of this, but within minutes of detecting, we were able to notice this was a suspicious activity, and it started to reject those set of IPs that were actually coordinating this bad experience for us. I think more importantly, besides the denial of service thing that we prevented for our legitimate paid users, I think we also succeeded in reducing cost for us, because this is a massive cost load if we had failed in preventing that. So I'd say there's that. That's another system we have. There's a lot of database analytics kind of thing that we use it for our internal consumption, just to understand where the biggest usage is, where we need to improve things. So that is the high level of our technical underpinnings of the Okta identity system.
Sure. Rajesh, just curious, right? So because do you see any use of blockchain that can happen to what you guys do? What's your take?
Yeah, so I think when you say Okta's fundamentally in the business of trying to make workforce users successful. And I think that is in that space, that the bigger question we need to be asking is what problem we want to solve. I think in that I think people tend to talk about blockchain in conjunction with where there is this concern about trust, and that there's too much power centralized with one authority. And how do we break that trust factor, or how do we decentralize that trust factor and make it and centralize it on the users? So I think if you the way I think about blockchain is you have to go back at the history of the whole evolution of identity. I'd say identity has experienced 3 waves of evolution. I think the blockchain is probably the wave 3. That's the best way to put it. If you will, I can quickly talk about the first 2, because it's important to understand how blockchain fits with the first 2. So the first wave is when every user would create an identity to access an application. And soon we got into the state of hundreds of passwords, right? People started to reuse the same passwords on different sites. And you know how bad that is to your privacy and trying to avert any kind of data disaster. One hijack in one place can lead to all of those accounts being compromised. Correct. So this one-to-one thing gave birth to, can we solve this problem to some sort of like some single sign-on experience? And I think that was the main opportunity that Okta sort of like captured on. I think where Okta was very unique compared to the rest of the competitors. They did this in the cloud. So I think Okta is the first identity service in the cloud. Unlike when even Microsoft was just trying to figure this out. Okta had already successfully built the service in the cloud. And that's super powerful because everything is going to the cloud. And so that led to this extreme success of Okta in the last decade, I'd say most recently in the recent few years.
Sure.
So that's the wave two, where companies like Okta, through the federated single sign-on model, you basically give this idea that I don't have to create multiple user accounts. Just by having one account with an identity provider, I can have a service provider get into a trust relationship with the identity provider. So when I access, let's say, Gmail service, it will challenge me that, prove your credentials to me. And at that point, that's a redirect to the identity provider. And if they say, because I have proved my authority or identity to, let's say, the identity provider through biometric, factors or strong factors, so they know that it's me, and then identity provider will issue an access token to the service provider. In this case, the Gmail example that I was giving. So I think that has worked really well for a lot of customers. I think the blockchain part plays very well in the consumer world, right, where you don't want to give all your precious data to, let's say, Facebook or Google or whatnot. It's not because you don't trust them, it's because Google is also selling you a lot of other services.
Correct.
And so there is this risk that as they do this, they are getting into some kind of like data brokering and storing some of your privacy data. And there's definitely a risk with that. You must be remembering what happened with Cambridge Analytica scandal. So Facebook, so they took a lot of data from Facebook, and Facebook thought they were protecting it really well, but I don't know, I don't remember the full details, but Cambridge Analytica had a lot of powerful set of details on millions of users, and they used it to their advantage very successfully to whatever services they were trying to provide. I think that's fundamentally is what the blockchain-based distributed identity is trying to solve. I think the key word here is distributed identity. So it's not, the user's identity is not stored anywhere else. You own it. And I think this is an extremely ecosystem play. It's going to take a lot of services to come together to interoperate on this idea of distributed identity. But I would say, so that's the third wave. I know a couple examples where this has been put to some level of traction. I think there is this one example is, I think it's similar to what I think in India, there is this minimum wage, MNREGA or something. So how do you ensure that everybody gets a minimum wage? It's regardless of the fact they're working or not working. And I think that has led to creation of some leaning on the digital identity idea. I think it's called proof of humanity.
Right.
You've heard of that. But the idea is that you take a picture of yourself, and there is an identifier you create that that is tied to your digital device. So let's say your iOS-based phone or Android-based phone that is a biometric factor. And so you become the identity provider, or your phone becomes the identity provider, and right, where things are biometrically enforced. And once you issue, and that's the identity used to get your services.
Sure.
There is the best way to explain this. I think I went all over the place and may have not given a very compelling use case. The example we give is, so imagine there is Roopa as a user with her mobile phone.
Right.
You already use your mobile phone for a lot of digital payments. Can you use your digital phone or your phone as to present some key artifacts to providers that would want to check on some of those things? So here's one example. So let's say you have international travel coming along. So you go to the airline kiosk and they're asking you proof of your passport, and that passport could be a digital passport. And digital passport is issued to you by, let's say, the government of India, but you hold the passport and you don't give any rights to anybody to copy that passport. So the way the three-way brokering is going to happen is they will ask you your digital passport evidence, and this is where you use your biometric factor. So that will unpack and present your digital passport that you've obtained from, let's say, government of India. And of course, that already has gone through a level of validation that you're proving that's due to them. But once you've established that, you have your digital passport that can now be presented to the airline. An airline they could use NFC, that kind of technology, but they have now a validation or evidence of your credential, which they're now going to check by directly making a call to the government of India. And once that's successfully validated, your credentials verified and you have access. But in any of this, you never gave them to copy. All they did is just in time they made the verification. Just in time you presented them your evidence. So you can imagine a future world where we'll have mobile wallet that can store a whole bunch of credentials. So your vaccine credential proof, your degree credentials, your other forms of attestation given by different authorities, that now you have it as a holder, and it's all put on your phone, and your public key resides in the distributed ledger that anybody can use that to verify your credentials. So I think that's the basic idea. But it's still in a very early form.
Early stage. Yeah, I agree. I see what you're saying. So Rajesh, that actually brings me to the conversation that we had when we met. There was this very interesting chat we had about how you have conversations with your engineering team, right? And how deep you get into conversations of what they should be checking, the first principle thinking, and how they need to deep dive into a problem and figure out solutions. I remember this conversation that we had. So for a lot of viewers who watch this podcast, there are multiple people who get motivated and inspired by people like yourself. So what is one piece of suggestion or advice you'd like to give youngsters who want to grow up to your level? What is it that you'd want to tell them?
I think there is this idea people quickly lose that attach to, that I'm a software engineer and somebody's gonna tell me that there is this product feature that we want to build. Here's the specification for it, and all I'm going to do is deliver that.
Right.
That works to some degree, but I think it's not going to lead to a true inner joy or connection to what you're trying to do. So I think what has helped me and a lot of engineers and people I've seen, technologists who have actually thrived, is trying to build a true sense of context. What is the core problem here? And I think once you understand the context, you can surprise the leader or the product manager on some of the solutions that they wouldn't have thought of.
Right.
So I think this broader connection to the problem is very important for, I would say, most efficient problem solving. I think this is where I think people get into a more laid back mode, and they're not really driving things. So I would say, take a very deep interest in what is the problem we're trying to solve. Where is it coming from? Can I just assume what the asker is asking me to do is perfect, or are there more questions that we need to ask? I think those individuals will do really well.
Sure.
Because it's software, you can model anything, you can design anything, and it's never fun to see you put in a lot of sweat into building something and it doesn't get any adoption, or it gets a very weak traction once customers start using this. So take interest in whoever is the end customer. Understand their activity, understand their journey. So I think if you make that connection to ultimately whatever customer demographic that you're trying to build or solve a problem for, from which somebody extracted a context to propose some ideas on that somebody's trying to implement. So I think if you make that connection, you'll become a product manager's dream engineer to work with. And I think you're going to go places, you're going to do extremely well.
Wow. That's very well said, Rajesh. So are you guys at Okta hiring? Can we leave your social handles for people to get in touch with you for your engineering team?
Yeah, I think we are hiring in a few places, and I think we've definitely replanned and readjusted our FY24 plans, but there are limited areas that we've identified as areas of investment that we need to grow, and we have more work that our customers are expecting. So I think that's what's driving some of the hiring. So there's definitely, we're hiring. We're not hiring as we were hiring when there's a lot of free money around. So I think we're more, responsible and more careful in what areas we'll be investing in. Also, there's plans to potentially expand to an international developer site, and India's top of our list.
Awesome. So here's something that I'd like to share with the audience, that Rajesh comes across as an extremely well-managed leader, because he helps you figure out questions in terms of, for you to figure out what are the whys before you start working on something. I love our conversation, even the last time that we had, Rajesh, because you inspire an engineer who walks into a company to think, why is he doing what he's doing? He or she, the person, right? So that is your style. I've seen that through and through the conversation, even on this podcast. It'll be absolutely a joy for engineers or any level of people to work with you, because I think you help them see the bigger potential that they hold. So I would urge for people to go ahead and work with Rajesh. We will put out his social handles on this. And also for, I know that you also do go ahead and consult companies and, PE and VC firms. So we'll put out your social handles for people to get in touch with you as well. So it would definitely be of interest to multiple people, because there's always, constant lookout for technologists like yourselves for people to consult with. So we're going to take that as a yes, but before you say yes, to put out your social handles. I hope you're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm okay. I want to help. I love. I think there's a lot of useful stuff that I've acquired over the years, and I'm sure it can benefit folks who are dealing with those challenges. So I think I've dealt with a lot of challenges in trying to build software over the years. I'm sure it will benefit a lot of people.
That's really kind of you. Thank you so much, Rajesh. Just before we sign off from this podcast, I'd like you to share a few words. That is there any piece of advice you'd like to give engineers, founders, anything that you'd like to talk about?
I think the cloud has changed the software delivery model, the software development model. I think it's very easy to test a hypothesis or build a product. You don't have to spend an awful lot of money to test an idea. So it's easy to host it, and if it's possible. I think so. We're living some amazing times, and I think especially for I know a lot of consumers of your podcast are people in India, and I think India is doing extremely well. There are a lot of people to learn from around trying to solve local problems. So I think that's truly a joy to see that we're solving real problems that are annoyances or friction in our everyday life. I think that's the real power of using technology to solve problems. And I think we're using technology in every place you can imagine. And I think it's big time to be a technologist and work with mobile and cloud software to realize your dream and trying to deliver amazing value.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with you. Thank you so much for those wise words. Rajesh, was lovely hosting you on this podcast. I got to learn a lot about, why I shouldn't have asked you the question about blockchain with identity management, I'll be honest. But thank you so much. It's really, really enlightening to have you on this podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be on this show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.